So tonight, I thought it might be a good idea to read Jean Klein, Beyond Politics. Given what's going on and given what we're all in the middle of, I thought this would be a really good idea. Right, Paul? So now, Jean, for those of you who may not have known, Jean Klein was our teacher, and he was one of these wonderful people who he was a physician. He went to India to study. He stayed in India a number of years, and he had the awakening to his true nature. He came back, he taught, and he was just a beautiful, wonderful human being. In this talk, I'm not sure, I think he may have given this talk at the UN, but I'm not sure about it. But what I do know is that this was a talk that he gave when Europe was uniting, you know, when there was a united Europe. And he gave this talk. It's just 1993. It's applicable today. And wherever he speaks about a united Europe, we can talk about a United States. It doesn't matter. So what he's saying here, I think, is right on target with what's going on. So he says, he starts like this. When talking about a united Europe, one must first look at what it means to be united. The underlying reality of all human beings is one consciousness, manifested in very similar ways. Whether we are black, white, yellow, red, British, German, Belgium, French, we all have the same body structure, the same liver, same breathing systems, and these are affected similarly by the same fears, anger, hate, jealousy, sexual urges, anxieties, and so on. The body can be treated universally. The psyche and soul can be healed in universal ways. Humanity is profoundly one. We are, in any case, united. We only need to be aware of it. Without feeling this oneness, we can never come to a united Europe, or a united world, or a united America. There are two aspects to the unity I mean here: actual oneness and multiplicity in oneness. The most important is the recognition that our very home ground, our origin, is one. It is not a composed oneness, but actually is oneness. It is called by many names: consciousness, stillness, original nature. Now, we know only the qualified I as I am English, I am French, I am a lawyer, a man, a woman. But our original nature, which we have in common with all, is when the I stands without any qualification. So what he means, he's saying that our real nature, not what we take ourselves to be. We take ourselves to be a body, a mind, senses, thoughts, feelings. That's on the surface level of what we are, as objects. We are objects in one consciousness. But we take ourselves to be separate entities, and we have absolutely no thought at all or understanding at all what our true nature is. Because we take ourselves to be this me, this I, me. He's saying here, wait a minute. The I, such as I am a woman, I am a man, I'm a teacher, I'm a farmer, that qualifies the I, the me. But he's saying, underneath that is another I, a universal I. The I that we all share, the awareness that I am. Everyone knows they exist. Actually, that's the only thing we really know. Everything else we've learned and is a concept. But the only thing that we know for sure, which nobody has to teach us, is that I exist. I am. What is this I am? Is it this me? It feels like it's this me. But he says, go beyond that. Take away the I am so-and-so. And what are you? Then what? So, he says, what we have in common, our original nature, is when the I stands without any qualification. This unqualified I is presence, it's consciousness. You know you are. You are aware. There is an awareness, right? Take away everything else, and awareness remains. Take away your name, take away your history, take away your story, take away your hurts and your sufferings and the image that you have of yourself. Take all that away, and what remains is this I am, this sense I exist. And in that, in order to say that, there must be presence. You have to be present. There's a presence to that. It's in here, it's now. I mean, really, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it quite beautiful? To know that you can take everything away, all the hurt, all the sorrow, all the suffering, and know that here and now, you are. Just presence. This unqualified I is presence, consciousness. It is our home ground, out of which all phenomenal existence arises and into which it returns. Before we can be united, or even truly related, we must accept intellectually, even before we have the living experience of it, that our home ground is one. So he's saying before you even really feel it, if you can only intellectually accept, maybe say it as a premise, that we really are all one, that there really is only one consciousness in which these body-minds all appear. He says, start from there and see what happens. So he's saying, this experience, or this even intellectual premise that we are all one, this is the only a priori conviction that can ever work in solving the conflict in our world society. It is the only workable structure because it's the only truth. Out of that truth comes authority. And he differentiates authority with authoritarianism. Authority. It's the authority of truth. Right? To be guided by truth. Mm-hmm. And not by anyone's dictate. But by truth, by right action. By truth. By empathy, by humility, by compassion. Truth is the only sovereign. Truth is ethical, functional, and aesthetic. It is the fundamental knowing that consciousness without objects is our original nature. And that to take ourselves for individual personae is the sole cause of conflict and suffering. So it's, where is this focus? Is the focus on me, my, and mine? Then there'll be conflict and suffering. Right? Because then I have to go against your me, my, and mine. And then my self-interest versus your self-interest. Right? However, he's saying, if we can switch that focus to a sense that we are all one, that there is only one consciousness, and we're all part of it, then actions, behaviors start to change. They have to change. Because then in essence, you're me, I'm you. In essence, we have different bodies. We have different histories. We certainly have different conditioning. But the essence, your true nature, my true nature, is only one.
It's interesting. So you frequently hear the phrase, a shift in consciousness. But it's really good to be clear about what the shift is. Right? What Evelyn just described and what Jean just described. The shift in identity, away from taking myself to be the body-mind and seeing beyond that to this larger oneness, fundamental oneness that we all share. That's the shift in consciousness. There may be other shifts, but that's the fundamental shift.
Right. Every undertaking, he goes on, of a human nature must have as its background that which binds everyone together, which all have in common, which gives support to the phenomenal world consciousness. The expression of this deep conviction, see, that's so interesting. It's every human undertaking must have as its background that which binds us together. What an undertaking. Can you imagine? I mean, could you imagine if our politicians were able to view it that way?
Right.
So then what does this mean that even you're a Republican, I'm a Democrat, you're a this, I'm a that? What difference does that make when we're trying to do the binding of all of us together, uniting? Okay, so he says, the expression of this deep conviction is love, openness, humility, and the seeing of facts as they are, not the seeing of the products of wishful thinking and illusion, based on the misconception of the existence of a personal entity. See, as long as we all focus and have the identity only on us as separate personal entities, it's impossible for us then to go past that and to act in truth, to act in openness, to act in humility. How can we do that? So it's essential that the identity shifts.
The shift I was just describing.
That's right.
The shift.
That's the So, true thinking comes from non-thinking. True thinking comes from silence, from stillness, from this background. Thinking that comes from thinking is obviously based on memory, on past conditioning. And all thinking that is creative must be fresh, new, and free from preconceptions. It is not thinking that can change a society, but looking away from thinking. Right? That's right. Thinking that comes from thinking. Remember, we've spoken here about thought that comes as a pointer to the background, from the background points to the background, and thought that's coming from the me. That's the thinking he's talking about when he says we've got to have you're never going to have a good society from that kind of thinking. It's from that other thought. And he says that anything that's going to be creative, and we need creative solutions, but anything that's going to be creative, he says, has to be fresh, new, and free from preconceptions. That means it's got to be free from prejudice, free from bias, free from personal opinions. Can we look at a situation that way, in such openness, with such freedom, that then we really see what's going on? Because when we're looking with preconceptions, that means we're already looking with conclusions. That means we've already formed an opinion. That means we already have an image of this person, of that person, of those people. So how are we going to see? How are we going to see truth? How are we going to see reality if we're looking from the me? So, in the absence of a personal entity, the situation unfolds in all its possibilities, and the facts are presented. And that's in any situation in a relationship, in our daily life, in the absence of a personal entity, the me, the ego, in the absence of that, the situation that we're in, he says, and there must be truth to it. It seems like there's truth to it, because without the me, the facts of the situation unfold themselves. And then to whatever is the problem, it's in the situation. The answer is in the situation. But we have to be able to look at it without this ego me. Right? Without our story. Without our wanting anything, even a solution.
Could you explain what it means when you say, without a preconceived notion, the answer is in the situation?
Yes.
Like an example.
Okay, without the me. I'm trying to think of it. A situation, we have to make, we have to plan something. We have to plan a lecture. And there's a conflict of some sort with timing, with where we have to be and what needs to be done. And both things, a prior commitment and a new invitation, have come up at the same time. What shall we do? How do we answer this? Well, we have to look at both situations. But the first thing we have to do is we have to say, take out this me. So I'm just looking at the situation and I'm looking for the facts in the situation. And now I'm approaching it with, I don't even need to have a solution. I just want clarity. I want clarity. That's all I'm looking for here. And it isn't even I want, because if I say I want clarity, then I'm bringing the me into it. Clarity is needed. And that's what's important. So we look at both situations. We see the facts of each situation, and the facts will tell us what needs to be done. Whatever that is. Clearly, this situation A can be put on hold because situation B right now is the priority. But it means coming to it without this me. Because if there's a wanting, then there can't be a clear seeing. Because now I have a desire for something. I want this to be.
What comes to my mind is I'm thinking of John Kerry and the Iranian people talking about a deal or whatever. And so this one thinks of this country this way, this one thinks of that country. So there's already preconceived thoughts and ideas.
Cool.
You can be trusted, you can't be trusted, blah, 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 blah. Each one wants something. Each one wants a solution to the deal. I think that from the very beginning, from the get-go. And it's like unfolding layers and layers and layers and layers and layers for the two people making the true deal, seeing the facts. Almost seems, I would almost say, thinking of the real things happening, I could see if that could unfold. And what it would create is unbelievable, unbelievable things for the planet.
Yes.
But to get to that.
Yes. Well, then it means the approach. How am I coming to the table to make this deal?
From my resume.
Right? I'm coming because I wanted to, right? To expand me. whether it's me, my country, me, you, your country, whatever. That's what we're coming even to the table.
Yeah.
So how can we see the facts? But we still try, But it's not with clarity. And because there's really not true clarity, there's not true compassion, and therefore there is not true skill in action. The truth is never personal. Right thinking, right acting, and right feeling are not personal. This impersonal vision is the background of all harmony. When the perspective is clear, all practical issues will be resolved. Economic and political unification cannot take precedence over, but is a result of a clear perspective based on the oneness of humanity. The second aspect of unity is multiplicity in oneness. It is clear that when we realize, in the absence of the notion of the individual ego, that the original home ground of all phenomenal existence is consciousness, and that we are all essentially one. The great majority of conflict is caused by psychological survival, the attempt to protect one's ego or national ego in its many forms and extensions, right? In the absence of the person as a chooser, a judge, a comparer, there is the welcoming of life and all that life brings. Each person and nation must come to the understanding of this underlying principle we call love. It is an experience without an experiencer. Each person and each nation must come to the understanding of this underlying principle we call love. It is an experience without an experiencer. That means the experiencer is the me, the ego. What does it mean to experience, to feel, to know love without a me? That's what he's saying. When the experiencer is absent, there's no more conflict. Differences are faced purely functionally, without psychological involvement. Differences are respected. When one nation faces another nation, with historical, not psychological memory, it appeals to its greatness, its riches of culture, language, and tradition, and so on. And now he's going to tell you something very important and interesting. So look, really what he's saying here, you can apply it to any relationship. Because there's differences. Of course there are differences. We said the essence was one. Phenomenologically, we're different. So he's saying differences are faced purely functionally, without psychological involvement. Right? differences are respected. When one nation faces another nation with historical, not psychological memory, which the me carries with it, which, by the way, we don't need. The psychological memory are our stories, the wounds, the hurts, the disappointments. The psychological memory are the images we each carry about ourselves and others. Free from psychological memory, then you have a historical memory. Yes, of course. These are facts. You were born here, you grew up there, you went to school here. This is the work you do now, this is the work you do. These are just historical facts. But you see, we attach all those memories, those feelings onto those facts. So that's why we carry such a burden with us of all the hurts and the sorrows and the wounds and the images. So, he's saying here, it is the dynamism of a country that keeps it alive, virile, powerful. Otherwise it calcifies and loses all vitality and interest. In any case, true culture belongs to no one and to all. Because now he's saying here, what's important nation to nation is the culture. Right? The culture. The art, the music, the food, the various traditions of that culture. That's what makes it dynamic. It is in learning about and respecting the great thinkers and artists of our own country that one can learn to admire the cultures of other nations. Basing unity on economics is doomed to failure because it emphasizes the object rather than the origin. Right? It emphasizes the objects, but not that background. In a society based on acquisition, on greed and consumerism, a species of competition is born which has nothing to do with creative production and beauty. But when we live intelligently, without anticipation and end gaining, the roots of our society will change. The object will no longer take priority, but emphasis will be given to the ground from which it comes. A new renaissance is only possible when art and science, culture, is an offering to the ultimate. Without a feeling of the ultimate, it is not possible to create a cultured and happy society. And no society can be happy when it is culturally stagnant, when it has nothing to offer, nothing to be proud of, nothing to be admired. In adoration, there is togetherness. In listening to music, there is togetherness. In seeing painting or dance, there is togetherness. In the act of admiring, we are one. So he's saying, if nations can come together with an admiration of each one's culture, then we can learn. We can learn from other nations, they can learn from us. Then it's a true exchange of an opening and an offering of what each has to give. But I don't think that we even give any attention to that. It's usually, who do we have to protect ourselves from? Or who do we have to get something from? So it's really wonderful. He said, how much do we know of our own culture? And how much are we really giving attention to that? And once we can imbue ourselves with our own culture, then we can truly begin to appreciate other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he's saying here. With an open mind, without any bias or prejudice. Just an openness, a welcoming. And he said here, and this was interesting, that all culture, music, art, painting, gardening, the clothes you wear, the furniture you sit on, all that is an offering to the ultimate, which just means to the background of our true nature. That which we all are the essence of. And it's so beautiful because then it gets expressed in so many different ways. You know, if we could do that, what
and that's the multiplicity
and
the
that's the
oneness.
multiplicity in the oneness. And that's the multiplicity of the oneness. To look at the culture of a nation. That's really a good way to be with people as well, you know, in a macro level.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so now. He goes on to say, by the ultimate, I do not mean a personal or a conceptual God. Although this was a beautiful pretext for creativity and offering in the Renaissance, today's God language is purely conceptual. It's really a nuisance which prevents new knowledge and new discovery. God can only be discovered, never attained. The European God is a sleepy person responsible for 2 great wars. Today we must find what is beyond objects, and to find it we have to look where thinking cannot take place. Each one of us must find our true nature, not based on contrived morality and beliefs. It is this true nature which is the only sovereign. Sovereignty based on self-image, religious, political, or any other, is completely hypothetical and an illusion, and it will inevitably bring conflict. No nation in the world today can live in isolation. Real sovereignty is not based on competition and self-interest, but on knowledge and love. It is the superiority, not of others, but of ourselves. There is only spiritual authority. Temporal authority flows from this knowledge, this love. There is only one authority, and it is not authoritarian. The present rule of bureaucracy, where the so-called leaders are void of culture, authoritarian without authority, and acting from the personal point of view can never bring harmony. Loving and giving to our surroundings must be beyond the personal. For beauty is its own authority. When we no longer take ourselves for an image, inevitably arguing with other images, there will be no more talk of blending the practical with the spiritual, because the spiritual is the only practical way. Nothing else works. So, now, when he speaks about spiritual, mind you, he's not talking about an image of a god. He's talking about consciousness, awareness, pure, non-conceptual awareness, which we all are, which is our true nature and background. Because anything we do, anything we say, anything we experience, it can only be an awareness. You are never not aware. And we're all the same awareness.
Evelyn, how would you describe a country like North Korea? You were just speaking about isolation. I can't think of any other country that is as isolated as North Korea. How would this concept work? How could we do it?
It was not going to work in North Korea because that mind could never hear these words. It probably doesn't have a framework. Those people are so guarded and locked down. It would take a whole slow re-educating. You know, some people would hear this and not even have a framework to understand it intellectually. So those are very closed, conditioned minds.
But you could even say in the context of what we saw last night,
That's right.
you don't even have that awareness, right? That's total the exact opposite.
That's right.
Both policies or both discussions are driven by the exact opposite.
That's
I
right.
was wondering how this played to this audience. This is stuff that in the political environment people don't even think about.
Right,
That's right.
exactly.
That's right.
It would be really good to know if he did.
I will find that out.
I was wondering the same thing. Can you imagine that being delivered at the UN?
I know Krishnamurti spoke at the UN.
Yes,
I don't remember
I
if
don't
he
know.
did
We
or
have to
not.
try to find
But I
out.
would like to find
Yeah.
Krishnamurti's talk at the UN. But the point is, you see, as soon as you talk about spirituality or God, people immediately put it into hocus pocus and New Age nonsense. And so, so obviously this is not for everyone to hear or to see. It's interesting because you don't have to agree with this and you don't have to disagree with it. The idea is, can we have an open mind? And is there any truth in what he was saying? Well, there certainly is truth that we all as human beings have the same body, right? The same, like he said, the same liver, the same lungs, the same, we're all the same that way. And every single person on this planet suffers the same kind of fears, anxieties, heartaches, heartbreaks, pain, joy. But this doesn't matter. We're exactly the same that way. And we do know that we've all been conditioned differently. And we do know that in that conditioning, we've been brought up with all kinds of prejudices and biases. And we also know that every human being walking on this planet has an image of himself and herself. I'm this, I'm that, I'm not good enough, I'm not kind enough, I'm not lovable enough. Usually everybody's walking around in one way or another with the I'm not enough image. And so they present themselves with I'm wonderful, or they present themselves with, oh, I'm just nothing. But all that is an image. So all he's saying here is, what are we beyond that? Beyond this object we take ourselves to be. What are we when we take away the I am this or I am that? What are we when we take away the body, the mind, the senses, the thoughts, the history? What's left? I am. That's what he's talking to. That's the oneness he's referring to. And he's saying, if it were possible for people and nations and leaders to approach from that perspective, then what would society be like? There'd still be differences, but that's fine. That makes it interesting.
This is so interesting because also it's like he's introducing us to our true nature.
Yes.
He's describing, what our true nature would look like at a personal or a societal level. Because our notions of our ego are so well formed, but our understanding of our higher nature often is neglected. So it's interesting to see it that way. He's describing you to yourself with a capital S, or
That's
describing the
right.
essence, right?
That's right. That's right. So what I want to just briefly, this is from Lao Tzu, Chinese sage, Lao Tzu.
He was mentioned last week.
We mentioned him last week. This is what he says. Achieve results, but never glory in them. Achieve results, but never boast. Achieve results, but never be proud. Achieve results because this is the natural way. Achieve results, but not through violence. Force is followed by loss of strength. This is not the way of the Tao. That which goes against the Tao comes to an early end. Good weapons are instruments of fear. All creatures hate them. Therefore, followers of Tao never use them. The wise man prefers the left. The man of war prefers the right. Left and
Stage.
Weapons are instruments of fear. They are not a wise man's tools. He uses them only when he has no choice. Peace and quiet are dear to his heart, and victory no cause for rejoicing. If you rejoice in victory, then you delight in killing. If you delight in killing, you cannot fulfill yourself.
Could you read that again?
Okay.
That was so powerful. Oh my God.
Weapons are instruments of fear. They are not a wise man's tools. He uses them only when he has no choice. Peace and quiet are dear to his heart. And victory, no cause for rejoicing. If you rejoice in victory, then you delight in killing. If you delight in killing, you cannot fulfill yourself. Knowing others is wisdom. Knowing the self, your true nature, is enlightenment. To die, but not to perish, is to be eternally present. To die, but not to perish, is to be eternally present. To die to this me. To die to this ego that needs to take over, that needs to expand. To die to prejudice, to die to hate, to die to all those things in ourselves which keep us from knowing our true nature and seeing that we are all one essence. To die to that. You don't perish. You do not perish. You are then eternally present. Because the ultimate background, awareness, was never born and didn't die, cannot die. That's what he means. You don't perish. You are eternally present. But you need to die first. You need to die first. To all those things. To all the fears. To the image. Die first to the image that you have about yourself. You don't need an image. You certainly don't need a bad image. You don't even need a good image. You don't need an image. Just if you're present, why do you need an image? Then you just are in the moment. You're not carrying any burdens with you. I've got to be this, I've got to be that, I've got to look this way, I've got to speak that way. I am what I am in the moment. And only in the moment, because you all know that's the only place life is. It's only in this moment right now. But it's eternal.
Sounds forever.
Right? It's eternal. But you can know it only if you're present. And if you're filled with this constant me, my, mine, me, my, mine. How can we know who we really are?
So, it's like listening to all this, it makes you want to conjure up in your imagination what the world would be like, right? And I kept thinking all throughout this thing of Haiti, right? Haiti, this country that, for how long they've never been able to solve the problems. Even the Clinton Foundation went in there and looked, right? But so I was thinking, so imagine we had like an enlightenment squad, 12 people, right, who were enlightened, right? You go to Haiti, you remove every political figure, every layer of government, so just the population is there, and whatever natural resources they have. And I'll bet you, a team, 12 enlightened, how long you think it would take to, like, solve the country's problems and get the place looking good and being, and elevating the birth rate and the well-being of the population? Probably not very long. But it's just been mired in just one egocentric wave of scoundrels after the other. And that's globally, it's just a gradation of that on a global level. It's like we've said earlier, conscious-wise, we're still like pitched at this kind of survival level of consciousness.
That's what
where
he
it's
said.
competing self-interest. And you just get the pros and cons that come with that. But it pales to think of what life could be.
So those 12 enlightened people, men and women, would be, they would be present without a me, because the me can never get enlightened.
And then they would do what you were talking about before. Just the facts.
That's
like,
right.
What are the facts?
That's right.
The culture, the
right?
music.
Whatever the
That's
facts are,
right.
right? And the solution would come out of that because there'd be no personal motives running up against each other.
There would be right action, because there's not another agenda.
So how many enlightened people to fix the United States?
But that's it, that's why we each have, that's a responsibility, because it has to start with us.
Right.
That's the only place it starts, is right in here.
But it is interesting how resistant people in general are to that,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's obvious that people want to place themselves in one political division or one,
Yeah.
Well, it's all essentially for psychological security,
Oh, yeah.
right.
right?
Mhm.
So as long as there's
Fear-based,
a
obviously,
me, it needs security.
Mhm.
And it's innately insecure
Right.
because it just jumps around and gets satisfied and discouraged.
Right.
And so it's inherently unstable, but it constantly looks for security to stabilize it.
It seems to drive, right? It seems to drive action on a global scale. Right?
Oh, for
Absolutely,
sure.
absolutely.
That's how do you,
That's right. And that thinking mind divides. That's the nature of the mind. To divide, to separate,
right.
It's so
to compare.
It's so interesting you just said about the thinking mind, because I was thinking as you said that, we know that David Bohm, the nuclear physicist that was part of Krishnamurti's inner circle and his dear friend, he does this whole observation about that we're all wrong thinking. That thought is just supposed to be appointed to an intelligent pointer that looks at those facts in an unbiased way. But thought has done the opposite, and we're all identified with that kind of thinking, and we don't even see the difference. And he was saying until that happens, he doesn't see how anything globally really changes in any dramatic way. Just the fundamental ignorance of thought and how we use it and what it really is.
Can the me be attracted to another me? I mean, I don't even know what I mean by saying that, but it's like my me gets attracted to somebody else's.
Sure.
Same.
That's what happened. That's just it. And that's why, so that's another way of saying the image you have of yourself gets attracted to the image I have of myself. And now the images form a relationship.
I have to question every friendship.
Well, but you see, that's what the practice really is. That's the true meditation, is moment by moment in relationship to have an awareness of the me as it arises. You have no control over somebody
just
else's
gonna
me
say,
arising.
So you're in a relationship, but you only have control over yourself.
That's
You're
right.
powerless over the other.
Absolutely.
So you can do all that factual, but you've got that other person who's still got their me.
That's right, that's right.
They drive you
However,
crazy.
yes, if you're really free of the me,
Okay.
then you become the space for the other person to happen in, and there's a better chance, no guarantees at all, that there will be an opening, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as we're coming with a me on any level, that there's an agenda, or one unconscious reads another unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you say something here, on a deeper level, the real communication is going on. And the other one knows, So, but if there's an awareness on your own part of when that me arises and how it's now interacting, you can pull the plug on it. You can pull the plug on it. That's what awareness shines the spotlight. That's the beauty of awareness. Because you can see. You see your thoughts, you see your reactions, you see the responses. If not in that very moment, 2 minutes later you see it. At any point you can pull the plug. That's true meditation. Moment by moment. And that's the way, the only way that we have a hope of creating these ripples in society, starting with ourselves.
Who pulls the plug?
You know what? Awareness pulls it in. The seeing is the doing. As soon as it is seen, the plug is pulled.
That's good. The seeing is doing.
The seeing is the doing.
And it's interesting, that links up to what you were saying before. It's like, so you were kind of giving the situation, well, I'm pretty much enlightened, but I'm stuck with this
Right.
egocentric partner, right?
Yes.
Well, the thing is, if you're
So then
real...
you gotta pull the plug.
No, but
Sometimes you do that.
I'm unplugging.
but when in those moments, right, I can be really free of the me in my response to his stuckness, then I show it to him in a way that is not motive driven. It's like holding up a mirror, and then the other person has the opportunity to see the facts, to see that he was stubborn, she was snippy, whatever. The facts are right there, and perhaps then in seeing the facts, a change occurs. But it would mean really being neutral when I'm asked to see. That's the path of the person who feels they're functioning at a higher level of self-awareness than their partner is. But what do you do in that situation? You can only be a mirror. And to be a mirror, you have to be free of your me.
You can't be a mirror forever.
That's right.
No,
You can't be
that's
a
right.
mirror forever.
That's right. So it's at some point there is really no relationship, because what are you relating to?
Right. But most of the time, the problem isn't one of how long it's been going on. Most of the time, it's one person being stuck and the other person not being as unstuck as they think they are. If you got that.
I think it's,
What do you mean by that? What a person thinks they're not as enlightened as they think
No,
they are?
well, it's like the dyad she hypothetically presented is that, I really got my act together,
Right,
but
right.
you're still in the dark ages. Well, most of the time I don't have my act
Right.
together as well as I think I do.
Right,
Right.
because if you did, there probably would be, I don't know, more compassion for the other person's
Yeah,
stuckness,
yeah,
or
yeah.
Really, probably.
Yeah.
Well, you
It
never
wouldn't
would
be
have
as
been with them in the
frustrating.
first place.
I don't know.
Well, you
What-
might
what-
update from the dark ages if you interacted on it, maybe.
It's in the approach.
Yeah.
It's in the approach.
I also think it depends, it gets back to why we're here, you know, like you were talking about Haiti, which is really interesting. I think it's a great example. So why are we here? Are we here to make a better Haiti, you know, functions more efficiently, you know, people can be educated, they can have these things. You know, if that's the purpose why we're here, that's one reason. But to what end, you know? Let's say we get an amazingly efficient society that's, you know, curing, you know, diseases, et cetera, et cetera. To what end? Is that really why we're here? And I see it differently. I think the reason why we're here is to become aware of who we are. And there's this thing out of the Yoga Sutras that says, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, it says something along the lines of, the universe exists so that we may experience it, and by experiencing it, come to know who we are. You know, so that's, for me, that's the reason why we're here, whether we're in the United States, in Haiti, on the moon, or any place else. So the objective for me isn't to have a more efficient life, more money, more power. It's to come to know the self. You know, that's the fundamental objective. So the thing about 12 enlightened men, it's a really interesting question, because I think there probably are 12 enlightened men and women. I didn't mean to say. I feel like there are 12 enlightened people on the planet. Why don't they step up? But my feeling about it is we're all kind of in this together, basically, and we're learning at our own rates, our own times, when we choose to learn. You know, you have certain personalities, and you can see them. They're playing out on the, you know, the political arena and across the world picture. And you know, they're not really particularly interested in learning. They're not particularly interested in compassion. They're interested, you know, they're bolstering that me. So what do you do with those people? You know, those are interesting questions. And why, if they're mucking up the works, do we take them out? You know, and if we do take them out, what happens to them? You know. So I think that's kind of it's a little bit different dynamic for me in terms of the fundamental why we're here, and also I find that I find it to be a very positive message, because it means that each of us, no matter where we are in a perfect place for us to come to recognize ourselves. Doesn't matter how much money we have, doesn't matter how much external power we believe we have. You know, each moment is the opportunity for us to recognize self. And you could say to pull the plug on the me, or another way of saying it is to plug in with the self, with the capital S. You know, so I think it's really kind of, and I was thinking about this a while back with like the Dalai Lama. You know, he's talking about how he might not reincarnate back again, you know. And you think about like somebody in that place, or they have this notion of nonviolence. So he's not going to go to the Chinese, and you know, he's not saying take up arms and do this. And so you could look at his life, you could look at the followers of that as living an incredibly futile lifestyle. You know, because they get massacred whenever, you know, these guys. Or you could look at it that each of them in their own way is working through this process of self with a capital S remembrance, and so that these external things don't happen, don't impact that at all. It's each opportunity is just another. Each experience is just another opportunity to come back to that practice of self-remembrance. And so then, when you have these relationships that we're in, you know, and somebody's not getting it, or it's an opportunity for us to say, it doesn't really even matter to me whether that person gets it or not. I can be loving and compassionate. And I don't mean to be disrespectful of what we're talking about, but I can be compassionate on a person, and then in that moment I can choose, how I would like to go forward in my own life. And I can be loving and compassionate, and at the same time recognize that person's on their own path, and it in no way hinders my own life, other than they present me with yet another opportunity to say, okay, I don't need to be triggered by this anymore, which I think is like what Paul's talking about.
I just wanted to also say, this was so wonderful to listen to. I'm so grateful that he gave this talk. I thought he said such wonderful things. It's so refreshing to have it wash over oneself. It's like, it's just food for the soul, so to speak. I thought he did a wonderful job, and you did a terrific job, Evie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reading.
Yeah. Terrific.
It's interesting. Ultimately, I guess we are really just instruments through which this self flows. And because it's not something we have to get, it's something we already are. And the idea is, and as Chip was saying, yes, every moment is an opportunity to remember what we've forgotten about who we really are. And then, how is it some people run to different countries and do feed children and help people, and other people, I don't know, give money or give clothes or give of their time? I think each one does whatever you can do based on your particular talent or your particular calling. The level
of awareness.
The level of awareness, but also the way the ultimate flows through you. So Fred is an instrument for music. Dan is an instrument for painting. We're all instruments for something, right? And that's why we're each so important, because that's why we're each sacred. You see, that's what's sacred, is the background of this self with a capital S that we truly are. This background, this oneness, that's what's sacred. And we're manifestations, we're instruments of that. So each of us is truly sacred. Now, how do we treat that which is sacred? How do we treat ourselves?
I have some couscous and corn.
Okay, good. So you feed yourself. Good. You feed yourself. That's beautiful. That's right. But do we take care of that which is sacred? Or do we beat ourselves up? Right? Right?
We could do both.
But but then that's not treating, that's not what you do. You don't beat up the sacred. You have humility for the sacred. You have adoration for the sacred. Because the sacred is beyond the me.
I'm confused about something you just said. So maybe you were talking about Fred with music and Dan with painting, and that was identifying.
No, I just meant as an instrument.
Okay.
That instrument plays music. This instrument
That
paints.
we're instruments.
That we're instruments. The sacred is, as an object, we're an instrument. No object was the sacred. That's always there. That awareness, that pure, non-conceptual, sacred awareness. And we're instruments appearing in that, and disappearing in that, and appearing in it and disappearing in it. But that background stays. Life does not stop.
That's right, it's eternal.
It is eternal, and it's eternal in this moment. And you are that.
And it's sacred because it's impersonal.
Oh, yeah.
It's not personal sacredness.
But you can start with the personal. Start with the personal by really adoring, having humility for, and treating yourself as sacred. Start there.
I always have a little trouble with that personal, impersonal. I mean, for me, my experience, and I think it's because I don't really understand the word personal, but for me, my experience is very personal. But I don't perceive it as a person.
As separate.
I don't perceive it as separate, and I also don't perceive it as this
Yes,
body,
that's
this
right.
mind.
That's right.
You know, but for me, it's like the most intimate
Yes.
thing. So I guess I get confused. You know, like, you know what I mean? It's
Yes.
So I get confused about that word personal,
Yeah.
because when I think of personal, I think of something intimate. So you know what I mean? So for me,
Yes.
it's like the most intimate,
Absolutely.
most essential.
Yes,
part.
that's an important point.
So, but I know what you're saying.
Yes,
There's
but
like
the
something in the
personal-
word that's.
Yes. What's meant here and in what is the separate, the ego.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But yes, but the knowing of the self is that's you. Couldn't be more intimate than that.
Right.
There is nothing more intimate than that.
Right.
This is what you love.
Right.
But it's changing all the time.
The me changes all the time.
All the time.
The
Every
me
moment.
changes all the time. That's right. But not, look, the awareness that you have right this moment,
With capital A.
with a capital A, is the same awareness that was there when you were 3, 33, 63. It's that same awareness, right? Of course it is, you know it is. That has not changed. The body changed, the beliefs changed, the thoughts changed. All that kept changing, but the awareness never changed.
Cost of living change.
The what?
Cost of living.
The cost of living changed. The cost of living certainly changed. That's right. All that changes. But the awareness of the cost of living hasn't changed.
The awareness hasn't been affected by it.
That's right. Hasn't been affected by it. Never affected by it.
My experience lately has been, it's I versus my ego, and it's like to come to the, let's say, emptying of my ego, to recognize it first, and then to know, always be aware of it, so when it gets in my way that I can be in control of it. Not control is not a good word. That I know it's there, and I know it needs to be done, but to have the courage to each moment be aware of where it's getting in my way, and that's the hardest thing lately. Because I know what to do, but it's just the hardest thing.
So then you might have to love it more. Take care of it, love it, and let it go.
I find talking to myself helps an awful lot.
Okay.
Because there's two of me. There's me saying, you gotta do this, and there's the other one saying, okay, slow down. Or it has certain compassion for the that part of me.
Yes.
And the conversation has changed over the years. I'm kinder And I know I'm beginning to love this life more because of the way I talk to myself.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting, that term, cost of living.
I know, it's powerful. That's really fun.
The cost of
Yes.
living. Right?
Yes,
Living should be free, there shouldn't be a cost associated with it, right? But the cost is all the stuff we carrying around.
The emotional cost. Not only the financial, more costly is the emotional cost. What we pay to live from the me.
Right.
Yeah, I like what you said about as you get older, you're kinder to yourself. Because that does seem to be like people who are more enlightened are kinder to themselves. But it reminds me of something that was read about that weapons are instruments of fear.
Yeah.
And so when we're beating ourselves up, that's coming out of fear, like that's coming from the me.
Yes.
That's why whenever I hear passages like that, I always think, because obviously I have no weapons of war, but for me, it's the equivalent of having thought. Like my thoughts are the weapons.
Yes.
Sometimes my words can be weapons, whatever.
Yes.
And so, if you're going to start with yourself,
That's
you
right.
know,
That's
eliminating these
Exactly.
self-immolating weapons
That's right.
first, and
That's right. Yeah, that's the work. That's the real practice. Yes.
So is that the sacredness you're talking about?
Yes. That's right.
There's also something about that it's kind of this tricky thing when we, like Bill, when you were saying this, I find this the most difficult thing when I'm doing this. It's kind of this catch thing, how we catch ourselves in ego, and we believe ourselves to be the ego. And so then it becomes hard because we are that ego.
That's right.
So all those powerful experiences of shame, guilt, remorse, we have all these hooks that totally hook us into the ego. And it's only by taking that step of saying, I'm not the ego, I'm this pure self, that we can kind of step outside of that. It's like that step of faith into this is not who I am, But our society is so, everything in our society constantly, I shouldn't say everything, most things in our society are continually pointing to us as the ego. Say you're that white guy, or whatever. This everything. It's this identification. So the world's constantly giving you this feedback of you are the ego, and we take that on, and I think that's the biggest. Like what you were saying, I love that. Just to be loving of the self, and in recognition of this is not who you are. You're this limitless self. You're not the white guy dressed in, whatever that image is. And so somehow we've gotten tricked on our own minds to believing that we are the ego. We come here every week and talk about we're not, but probably there's a good portion of us to go out and start believing we're the ego once we leave this.
Sure.
And so I think that practice of remembering that we're not that ego, we're not that self, we're not bound by those egoic thoughts anymore.
We've neuroplasticized the ego in that context. Our lifetime of experience has built that up so that it's very hard to let go of it. We've spent a lifetime defining ourselves by that.
Yes.
So what we're doing here is, in a sense, unlearning a lifetime
That's right.
of that. And some days you're more successful at it than
That's
others.
right.
If I empty myself of the ego, and if I'm empty, other egos cannot find anything, they're not going to affect me. So I need to empty my ego before I'm safe from other egos attacking me, kind of poking through me. And that's the hardest thing, to be egoless, be aware of that. So, you can't be hurt if you don't have, if you're empty, there's nothing to really affect.
So can I ask you,
Mm.
when you did the process emptying, was it a bit at a time, or did you just throw everything out at once?
I'd like to just come to terms with it and be aware of it. But it does take a lot of work because it took a long time to fill it up. Now to kind of empty it. That's the hardest.
Were you
part.
able to identify components that you were getting rid of?
Little by little, it's like they say when you wash the rag gets a little cleaner every time.
Could you define it?
Hmm?
Were you able to define it to yourself?
I can't really explain it. It's just something you experience, and one experiences. And it's the hardest thing because, as I said, it took so long to build it. Now it takes a lot of effort, and I need to let it go. But I need to let it go. I know that I do. Because that's what I ultimately hope to have, or should have. Not should have, but ultimately I am.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, we'll have some tea. I'm just wondering if, because something Chip said is really important. I don't know if I should introduce it or not. You see, I'll just try briefly. See, the observer is the observed. So in other words, when, let's say, fear comes up, or hurt comes up, or pettiness comes up, or envy comes up, see, the ego like splits itself. It looks and it is. You see, it sees what it is. The observer is the observed. But awareness is aware of the whole thing going on. That awareness, aware of that whole thing going on, releases it in that moment. That's when the seeing is the doing. So it's not really effort. It's be careful not to be hard on yourself. The self-love. I'm just using this now, just for kind of a teaching thing. The self has to love that ego. Because the self, ultimately the ego is, there's only the self. There's only the self. There's only the absolute. And you are that one thing. So when that ego arises and sees the pettiness, okay, awareness sees the whole thing. In the seeing is the doing, the releasing. Letting go. Comes back, letting go. But the most important thing is not to beat yourself up, because that's ego again. So if you can't be aware of anything else, aware of the hitting on yourself, beating on yourself, the weapon of destruction. That's what's most important, and let it go.